I'll begin by asking you to walk me through the moment you were informed of your suspension. What was it like?
Yes,
And what was the official reason provided by the school's administration?
absolutely. Just to say as well, I can also send you documentation as well that I received, so you can see the stuff that they sent me as well. But just in short, first, I received just an email on the 23rd of September, and the email stated that, oh, you have been suspended and effective immediately, and you have to come into a meeting to learn about the impact or learn about the details of my suspension. So I went into the meeting with a faculty advisor as well as a union representative. As we were in the meeting, I was told that I'm suspended and I'm perceived as a threat to Cornell's community and Cornell's campus. I banned from campus. By the end of the meeting, there was a police officer waiting for me to hand me a persona non grata form, which stated that I'm banned from Cornell's campus indefinitely. And then, in addition to that, I was told that they're going to de-enroll me. And once my de-enrollment process begins, I will have to leave the country promptly, and I will have no grace period. I was told to contact the Office of Global Learning, which is our immigration services. I contacted them, and they informed me what happens when I get de-enrolled. And yeah, so that's how I was told.
I imagine that must have been surreal. Knowing how much of how your stance come from a place of deep conviction. But were you told
Exactly.
immediately that this was in connection with your participation in the pro-Palestinian demonstrations, or that was an information that came
Yes.
after?
No, 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 no. It was immediate. So what had happened is they said we have received accounts. You have been referred to my office, and the office is the Office of Student Code of Conduct and Community Standards. And I was told that they had received off a complaint regarding my behavior on the events that took place on the 18th of November, which was a demonstration in solidarity with Palestine. So yeah, they told me that it's because of my participation.
Right, right. So, I would like you to just touch on the efforts that you made to, appeal or address the suspension.
Yeah.
I would imagine that it got difficult because, the lack of due process, how you were immediately banned from campus, might have
Yep.
even made things even more difficult. But how did you handle that?
Yeah. So then initially, immediately I had to get my lawyer involved. To talk about immigration consequences. And then I was told that I have two layers of appeal going through the university. The first layer of appeal goes to the vice president of student campus life. And this was rejected within 24 hours. He rejected my appeal straight away. Then it had a second layer of appeal, which is which was my appeal goes to the provost, the interim provost, who's also deemed as the chief academic officer. After which I appealed to him, and then I was invited into a meeting with him, physical meeting. I had a meeting with him. He told me that, we're trying to consider a way out. We're trying to consider a way in which, they respect the administration's concerns whilst also allowing me to continue my studies. So then I was told he'll get back to me within a week. He got back to me a week later and essentially said that the restrictions still apply. So I'm banned from campus still. I'm no longer allowed to teach my class. My class will be taken away from me. Um, I'm restricted to I can possibly go to Friday prayer and we're still figuring things out. And however, I can keep my visa and I can submit my work and get my degree. So that's where things are now.
I can imagine again how difficult this has been for you. But looking at
Absolutely.
how the stakes have risen for you, as the as this issue has developed, do you feel a sense of security at all, or how are you handling these uncertainties?
I mean, no, you can't feel a sense of security, even though I take this as a win because initially they wanted to deport me and I'm still here. But the fact that they have this over me, like, they're able to dangle your precarity over your head. The fact that I'm an international student, the fact that they know, like, when push comes to shove, whenever that they will side with their donors and they will side with outside pressure to get rid of people who are pro-Palestinian. So it's an equation they made, and I think on this equation, in this scenario, the equation was too costly to get rid of me. But I think anything can happen again in the future. I could say
Yeah,
something they don't like. I could say something they don't like. I could post something they don't like, and the next minute it becomes a backlash, and then they feel like they have to succumb to the pressure.
right, right. I hear you. Especially the point where you said they were dangling, your career and what you were doing
Yeah,
in the country, in your face. It's also a sort of dehumanization. More like,
absolutely.
yeah, like why are you speaking? You don't even really have a stake here.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, it just follows, the pattern of oppression and repression that's going on just to cover up the genocide. But
Exactly.
how has the support been like for you on social media and personally with people that you are close to and your relatives?
Yes, I mean the support on social media was overwhelming. I did not anticipate the level of support I received, and if I'm being honest, it far exceeded what I thought would be the case. In addition to my family has been amazingly supportive of me. My family's, very proud of me. People are seeing this as a win for, protesters around, because this was a test case. This was the first case in which someone was going to be deported, and it showed at least that if you fight back against these institutions, you can win, right? You can win. And I think my case demonstrates that.
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree with you. Um, just a quick one, still on social media. The campaign, the support that your campaign has generated, how do you think this affects social media as a tool for digital activism? People have often seen it as surface level and too fleeting to generate any real or long-term systemic change. But how do you see this? Do you think there's been a change and things are evolving?
I think there's different battlegrounds, right? I don't want to overstate social media being the tool in which we're going to exact fundamental change in society. But I think as a tool of raising awareness, and fundamentally, we are engaged in a battle of ideas. And we are engaged, we're up against corporate media, we're up against people who are backed and financed very well. And social media is free, right? So it's a powerful tool given that it's a resource that allows us to get a narrative out there. Because honestly, my case, yes, I had my amazing legal team and the amazing union and internal people, faculty, and students backing me. But my ability to get the message out there via social media was absolutely pivotal to keeping me in the country because a minute I tweeted, it got picked up, it went viral, it got picked up by other cases, by journalists, by press, and it just continued to build and cascade and yeah, get into it became the story that it is. And I think that's due to social media, and that didn't cost me anything to do that.
True, true. I completely agree with you, Mr. Tao. I'm holding myself back from calling you comrade, but I guess I'll just go ahead.
You can call me comrade.
Yeah, I should say that I'm a base group organizer with the
Oh, amazing,
Socialist Workers League here in Nigeria. Um,
amazing.
a cadre formation that's associated with other mass based leftist movements. um, here on the
Mhm.
ground. So, I mean, I've always seen you as a comrade from afar. So, let's talk about Israel's actions in Gaza and other
Mhm.
parts of occupied Palestine. The West, which we are not really, factoring their opinion into this issue, anymore,
Mhm.
but still, has refused to call it genocide. What is at stake here for this normalization of human suffering at this height, not just for the Palestinians, but for the global majority?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think brilliant question. I think fundamentally we really have to reckon with like this is the Western world, right? This what we're witnessing in the world today, the violence, the brutality, the indifference to suffering, the willingness to continue suffering against the bodies of against black and brown people is the story of the West. And I think it doesn't surprise anybody in the global majority because we're accustomed. I think what this moment has done, and I've often said that what Palestine is doing, it's holding up a mirror to the entire Western liberal world. It's holding up a mirror to the international liberal order because, again, it's fascinating to me that naively sometimes I think, oh, wow, the United States will be willing to expend all its political capital that it has in the world over this small colony. But then at the same time, you realize it's not being driven by any rationale, but it's being driven by imperialism. So that's how I kind of make sense in it. But what's at stake is that like I don't see a way that our world will ever be the same again. We've seen way too much. We've just seen way too much.
Absolutely, absolutely. The images, the videos that are coming out
Yeah.
of it's totally unbearable. For the human
Yeah.
spirit, and rightfully has garnered attention from around the world. But there
Yeah.
is still this feeling of a power controlling the narrative. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it, I don't think that we've gotten to that point where the world is completely splitted into two. Uh, I, like many would assume that there are still people who are ignorant, people whose source of information has been, mainstream media. How do you think activists, journalists, and people in academia can disrupt that, in reshaping the conversation and bringing more enlightenment to people, especially you would expect that some countries in the global south, the mass population of young people would be in solidarity because this feels
Mm-hmm.
very close to home. But when
Yeah.
you check the influence of the media, the influence of Christian Zionism, and it's just too
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
brainwashing around. So,
Yeah.
how do you think we can reshape this conversation and bring more enlightenment to people who don't seem to get the gist of it?
Yeah. It's amazing, right? Because even we're up against such a well organized, well financed machine. Like it's not a joke when we call it the Israel lobby that exists in the US. It's like they finance the campaigns of so many politicians. They ensure that the narrative gets out there that is friendly towards Israel. So we're up against a very an extremely well financed formation. However, again, what I think has been amazing is that the decades of knowledge, for example, like more and more people are beginning to understand the Nakba. More and more people are beginning to understand why forms of resistance emerge. More and more people are beginning to understand, Israel isn't the safe, or isn't the bastion of democracy in the Middle East, as people say. And people are beginning to realize all the lies that people have been told about Israel are beginning to be undone. But again, it's we have a lot of work to do because, but interesting. I do think it's not at the pace I would like to see. Like I thought I would see so many more factions of the world outraged by now in en masse. However, what has been fascinating to me is people who I would never expect to have a condemnation of Israel, have a condemnation of Zionism, like people in like jobs that like they're not activists, or people who are like in finance, and people who, sectors of our societies that you don't normally politically activated. When I've encountered them, they are becoming aware and having a condemnation of Zionism. So it's not at the pace I would like to see, but I think it's definitely coming down. Like it's definitely changing and coming. So I think we just have to continue going, and we have to realize that, like, we have to be able to bear personal sacrifice in order to push the narrative forward. So some people are going to lose their jobs, some people are going to lose their livelihoods, some people are going to have consequences, but these things actually contribute to the battle of narratives. So for example, my case, like, even though it was about me personally, I was able to use that opportunity to constantly bring it back to Palestine, to constantly mention Palestine. And that was a part of it for me.
Absolutely. I want to ask just to get a little bit more clarity on your background, because
Yeah.
very, very, very profound commitments that you have made, in that statement. But how did you come about this level of consciousness? Well, what's your political background?
It's so funny. There's people ask me this, and there's like, I can't point to one specific thing, but I can point to like several things, right? So politics was a mainstay in my house. My mother's side, my maternal side, um, my mom's grandfather, so my great grandfather was president of Gambia. But he was conservative, right? But I mean, again, when I was younger, I didn't really know the kind of differentiation between conservative and etc. in the same way. But he was conservative. But I just say that politics was a mainstay in my house. I remember being 10 years old, and alongside watching cartoons, I would always watch the news, like when I was a child. And I remember specifically would watch the debates in Parliament. So that was like a thing. I was like, oh, I really enjoyed. Like I could always speak about like mainstream politics at a young age. Then that was just like my politics, my attachment to politics. When I was 15 or 16, I think 15 birthday, I was gifted the autobiography of Malcolm X. And also as well, to be fair, when I was younger, I watched Roots when I was like 10, 11. So I was very much aware about like race and slavery and history of blackness, and these kind of things were very common in my house, and I grew up with these things in mind. When I was 15, I was gifted the autobiography of Malcolm X. And that then again so that introduced me to a further black consciousness, but also like a radical black consciousness alongside a like Islamic, like my faith as a Muslim was taken up again. However, that also coincided at the same time as Barack Obama's election. So I remember being also enamored by Barack Obama. I also believed, okay, you can change things from the inside, and we just need more black people with good politics on the inside to make change for black people. After Barack Obama's first term, I became really disillusioned with mainstream politics, and I just kind of believed more and more in like black self-determination, more of a black nationalist take. And then I moved to Egypt to study like Islamic studies. Whilst in Egypt during the pandemic, during the Black Spring of George Floyd, I became more and more interested in like radical politics again. Not again, but I guess more in like a Marxist analysis of politics. And then I moved towards a position of imperialism and anti-imperialism, and understanding, oh, okay, US imperialism and how that works around the world. So yeah, that's like my journey so far. And then I decided to do a PhD, and now I work on Pan Africanism in the 60s, 70s. That's like my focus.
Interesting, interesting. The question I was going to ask, as you were telling me about your political background, is if you've joined, or looking forward to joining any revolutionary political organization.
And you mean like in the States or in general?
In general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm tapped into like different movements with like different. A few of my friends have parties in like the Communist Party in Kenya, and my friends in Senegal. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely want to be involved more. I'm a part of organizing circles here. I'm tapped into like several groups, like Black Alliance for Peace, and my friends at the People's Forum in the US. So I'm tapped into many different organizing groups. But yeah, that's just my that's just the work that I do now. At the moment, mainly it's just I'm trying to do my PhD. That's like the main thing I'm trying to do. But I'm definitely attached to organizing circles, etc.
Right, right. Um, I mean, not to make this an issue, you or make an issue where there is none. But do you think that your identity as Black, to some extent, also affected, influenced the every response that you got from the university?
Oh, absolutely. The thing is, they want to make like an example out of me and my visibility as a Black Muslim. There's this thing of, in these institutions, especially when they're so basically racist, the understanding of Black people need to know their place. And I am somebody who doesn't know my place, basically. And because of that, I will be severely punished for not knowing my place. That's where I think it comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
Honestly.
I think on the other hand, a lot of people also want to lend their voice to
Yeah.
this ongoing struggle, but they
Mm-hmm.
feel distant from it. In the sense that we have, as we highlighted earlier, a media that keeps, numbing the effects of this crisis on the population, and people that are just also lost in their own cause. But do you think that there are concrete steps that people can take to align themselves with the Palestinian cause that's not just symbolic?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think there's many layers to struggle, right? There's applying pressure to politicians, ensuring that politicians wherever they go, they shouldn't be able to have arrest. But if we're being totally honest, these are good and symbolic. But there's people out here, and I'm not gonna like like call for that. But there's people out here just like they're closing down Elbit weapons manufacturers, right? Like that's a big step. Closing down weapons manufacturers is a big step. Also, targeting those workers that load up the shipments for weapons is also a place of struggle. So yeah, there's very material things you can do, but I'm someone who believes that as well as the symbolic, also you have to, if you can, is get involved in direct action, and there's many different ways to do that.
Great, great. Could you briefly summarize this issue for a starter? Say for maybe a Christian brother who's been
Mm-hmm.
groomed to support Israel as God's chosen people all their lives,
Yeah.
and it's just coming to terms, feeling the natural repulse to the ongoing crimes, but cannot navigate the issues. How would you
Yes.
summarize this ongoing crisis?
I mean, I'll start that the Israel in the Bible, it geographically, is not even the borders of the Israel today, right? Israel in the Bible is a very different understanding today, where the Israel today is this, I'll say it's a settler colonial project. I will draw comparisons between the in the Americas and the expulsion and genociding of indigenous population in Australia and New Zealand and in Canada. I'll say this is just I say that Zionism is not a movement attached to Judaism, and is not. And even if we take Zionism on its own claims, okay, the crimes in which the Jews suffered, the Ashkenazi Jews, European Jews suffered at the hands in throughout the ages were at the hands of Europeans. If this is an atonement for that crime, then the atonement of the crime should be felt, or should be meted out, or be within the places in which they suffered, right? In Europe, this is European. Anti-Semitism, as we understand it, is a European crime. Secondly, like the claim of, okay, they needed a place to stay. The land was, people were there. People lived there. Palestinians lived there. Arabs lived in that region. And so the Jewish people, actually. It was never an issue of coexistence. It was an issue. It became an issue when it was an understanding that there needs to be a state, an ethno supremacist state in which, based on ethnicity, you are granted more privileges and rights in the state. And I would say that this is not an issue of religion, but it's an issue of Jewish supremacy. And I would say that in a too long don't read version, it's a very simple understanding. The leaders of Zionism were, first and foremost, many of them were atheists, and secondly, they're explicit. This is a colonial ideology. And the reason why it received the backing it received from the West initially was not because out of love for Jewish people, but because they wanted a colonial outpost in the region. So I would say, like, it's a very, like, again, it's like I just don't believe in supremacy of any ethnicity, and what Zionism represents and what Israel is, it is the culmination of Jewish supremacy. Yeah. So I think that's where I would begin anyway, and depending on where the person goes, we can have a conversation. But I think it's a very simple. And when you understand what settler colonial is, we have histories of. We have America, we have New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and I think this is another iteration and another example of that.
Right, right. I would want you to just straight away touch on we why can't Israel live at peace with its neighbors? Why can't we have Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and people of whatever other religious belief in the region coexist in peace? Many people have argued that Israel has also tried to bring about the realization of the two-state solution or peaceful coexistence. How would you, expound this framing just a little?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it's not true, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, you establish your state by 1948 Nakba by ethnically cleansing almost a million Palestinians, right? That's how you establish your state. How can you ask for coexistence when your establishment of the state is displacement? Any sincere attempt at coexistence would fundamentally include the right to return, the right of return, the right for those families who have been forcibly displaced through the establishment of Israel's state to return back to their homes. That has to be a fundamental right and a fundamental beginning. Every chance there's at statehood and coexistence. Why should even the state that they suggest right now, two-state solution? How is it just that the majority population and the origin and the native population has access to 22% of the land, whilst those who are from Europe have 78% of the land? How is that a just separation? And I don't even believe in two-state solution, to be honest, because what we've seen time, if we have the settlements haven't stopped, the Oslo Accords was basically a giving up of resistance, a giving up in the of a state that might come in the future. And you see the Israeli politicians today. They, behind closed doors, they laugh at a two-state solution. They don't believe in the two-state solution. They keep talking about there's no two-state solution, because fundamentally Zionism is an ideology that believes that it has to have the whole land first and foremost. And fundamentally it believes that the Palestinians are the Palestinians, and they don't even call them Palestinians; they call them Arabs. And fundamentally, Zionism is an understanding of Jewish supremacy. So even if the land is shared, there must be an ethnic group who are on top, and which will fundamentally continue to be a form of apartheid, which it is today. So my thing is, it's an ideology and an understanding of the world in which enables Zionism, and that I don't know. I do not know how you coexist with that. I don't believe in a two-state solution. I actually believe in a one state with binational citizenship, right? I believe that there can be a one state, two peoples, binational citizenship, and I think that can be a diplomatic path to move towards, but that has to be facilitated by the international community.
Excuse me. Great. So what you're saying essentially is turning the conversation that's been going on in Western circles all the way around. You're saying Israel should lay down its weapons and surrender. Is that it?
But it says Hamas should lay down the weapons and surrender.
Yes, it's been, Hamas should lay down their weapons and surrender so that we can quickly reach a, hostage deal and all of the other talking points. But
It was never about Hamas. It was never about Hamas because at the end of the day, when it comes, if we're going to be sincerely honest, Hamas was not there in 1940, 50, 60, 70, right? Hamas emerges because of the treatment that Israelis, like the non-stop, the occupation, the illegal settlements, the kind of summary, the every so often killing of Palestinian people. Hamas emerges out of specific conditions of resistance, the people who refuse to be treated as second-class citizens. That's where Hamas emerges out of. You cannot kill resistance movements. History has shown us this. Hamas, what Israel wants is a demilitarized Palestine that to have illegal settlements. People can be people can be detained, and you have no right and no form of recourse to justice. And the only thing you have is like you're a bird in a cage, and you are controlled by Israel. That's what they want. They want a complete capitulation to the conditions in which Israel sets on all the terms. Why would any human being accept that?
right.
Like, why would any? Yeah, well, I don't know how any human being could accept that. It's like you're living in a bird in a cage, and you are controlled. Your whole livelihood is controlled by an external force.
Right. I want you to speak to the designation of Hamas as a terrorist organization and how it follows, Western labeling of national liberation movements and resistance group as criminals and savages and terrorists who should be wiped out.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the power of discourse is extremely powerful. Manufacturing consent is extremely powerful. We have to understand the war of terror, right? The war of terror instituted this new form of warfare that is not determinant on like geographical location or against specific enemies, identified enemies. It's that okay, anyone quote unquote is labeled as a terrorist can be eliminated and killed, and you manufacture consent around the world and in societies to be against these people. So like again, the majority of the world does not designate Hamas as a terrorist group. It's the Western world that does so, right?
Right.
Only the Western world does so. And again, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But fundamentally, these labels, we have a history, particularly in the United States, of people being labeled terrorists. Assata Shakur, who is still in refuge in Cuba, was deemed as a terrorist, parts of the Black Panther movement. Nelson Mandela, who the West continuously celebrates, was on the terrorist list as recent as the early 2000s, right? So again, and that was the UK as well, and the UK deemed Nelson Mandela a terrorist as well. So I don't know. These lists aren't really serious, right? These lists, they serve a political purpose than actually reflecting a reality.
Right, right. The scenes that are coming out of Gaza and other parts of occupied Palestine are very, very disturbing, beyond disturbing.
Yeah.
I also want you to touch on that.
I mean, I cry every day. Like I'm not even particularly. I'm an emotional person, but I'm not someone that cries actually that much. But I cry every day, and I'm saying that I don't really say that publicly, but I literally every single day I must shed tears because like there's a hope, there's a feeling of wow, the world is letting this go on. I'm seeing these images, the indifference. It's like when I think of what James Baldwin said, where he said that I'm terrified at the moral apathy because I think to myself, if they can allow this to happen, they can allow this to happen again and again and again. And who knows when it's like when it's against people in this country, when it's against us now, right? So yeah, I just think it's frightening, it's scary, it's shocking, it's heartbreaking. But the only thing that gives me solace is in this moment is for me, Palestinians have not given up on their struggle, and they themselves have not given up and realized that they've not given up on their struggle and realized that that they're still fighting for their liberation. And we know history, right? There's a great cost to pay for liberation of a land and a people, but they will be victorious. That's what keeps me going. That the history determines that, and history has shown us that they will be determined. They will be victorious. Um, so yeah, I think. But yeah, it's. I don't want to downplay the emotional toll it has on so many of us because it's. I never thought we'd be in a stage in humanity in which there would be genocide live streamed to our devices, and it would not be met with like people wanting to do everything in the world to stop it. It would be encouraged, enabled, and and allowed to continue. It just it for me it's like it, it's an analysis of where humanity is at the world right now, and it's a very scary place. It's a very frightening place.
Yes, it is indeed. If you look at what's going on there, one lacks words, for what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. One lacks words for what's going on. Yeah. Let me
Yeah.
ask you, how would you respond to those who have said, we know that there's a crisis going on, or quote, conflict going on, but Hamas should never have attacked Israel on October 7th. And Hamas shares some sort of responsibility because even um some other part of the West, or some politicians who cannot stand the horror that's going on, when they come out, they'll say, oh, we condemn Hamas for October 7th, but also Israel is doing too much. That nuance, one would argue, distorts the reality. But how do you respond to that? People who think that what's going on is in any way a response to the attacks on October
First
7th.
of all, the sheer like numbers, right? They were talking about like 17,000 children being killed, right? Even if it's a response to what the 1,400 Israelis that were killed, what is level proportionality? But for more fundamental than that, the October 7th was a military operation that resulted in the deaths of some civilians. The overwhelming majority of October the 7th were military personnel. There were the overwhelming military personnel, and there were civilian casualties. But and significant portion of those killed were killed by Israel's own army, which has been documented and highlighted and proven. Right, there was no beheadings of babies. There was no mass rape. That's all been debunked, right? So at the end of the day, October the 7th was a military operation by a military wing of a governing authority against an occupation in which they have the right to resist, and it resulted in civilian casualties. Like again, fundamentally, what this narrative does, it wants us to start on October the 7th. It wants us to start as if history began on October the 7th, right? That's what it wants to do. But we know, and that's why we have to continue to reject that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We have to. States that have failed to hold Israel accountable for its actions, we understand that states have legal obligation to prevent the crime of genocide. They are also obligated to take concrete actions to end Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories against international law in a recent resolution that was reached by the United Nations. But is there any form of understanding that we could extend to states that are hesitant or that have not responded very actively to these international obligations, which by extension, continues to facilitate the genocide? The silence continues to exacerbate issues. in the ongoing crisis. But do you think there is any sort of understanding that maybe perhaps due to their economic interests or diplomatic interests, do you think states that have failed to take any action would have any form of excuse for it in history or later in the future?
No, 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 no way, no way. I mean, they have no, they have no excuse for it, and I genuinely believe there's going to. I don't have much hope in the institutions like UN or ICJ and ICC, but I think there'll be many people implicated in the genocide clause in the future, and I think like Joe Biden's legacy is going to be the butcher. Is a butcher. Is a butcher. Again, these people are going to their legacy is going to be the genocide, no matter how they spin it, and people won't forgive or forget. And I think when it does eventually come to an end, and the more images come out, and more people tell their stories, right? I think the world has just seen too much, and I think those states are going like the states are going to be implicated. And it's interesting, even the Western states now, some of them are changing their tone. Macron has changed his tone a bit. Um, some of the folks in the UN begun to change their tone a little bit as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to the kind of destruction that Israel is carrying out across the Middle East. Because, I mean, you are getting France to condemn your atrocities. Yeah, you are
Mhm.
getting Italy to call you fascist. This
Exactly.
this is some, level of depravity never seen before. Never seen
Yeah.
before. Yeah, but I don't want to draw out the conversation for too long. But I want to ask other marginalized groups that are still resisting occupation across the globe, some resisting neocolonialism, some have not even been allowed a chance at modern statehood, talking of conflict ridden places like Congo, Sudan, and other parts of the Sahel. How do you contextualize this into, a united global uprising against capitalism and
Hmm.
the destruction that it brings with it?
Yeah, I think fundamentally what we're seeing is imperialism. People are recognizing more and more imperialism, and what we have is whenever you have the onslaught or the continuation or the unfolding of imperialism, you have its opposite, right? Anti-imperialist struggle, and that's what we're seeing in movements in West Africa. That's what we're seeing in the global South. That's what we're seeing in the Middle East. We're seeing people railing against imperialism because fundamentally imperialism is about suffocation. It's underdevelopment of places for the development of other places, and it is an infringement of sovereignty. And I think what we're seeing now is a reclamation of sovereignty in so many parts of the world. So I think all these things are connected, right? As imperialism continues to unleash itself, and we're seeing the brutality of it now, we more and more, I think we're going to have more and more resistance to that, right? Because it's about suffocation, and there's only so much people can bear. So yeah, I think it's all connected to me. I see the primary kind of contradiction of the world is to be imperialism. So and that determines how states relate to each other and to themselves.
Right, right. Let me also ask this question. Israel is not just terrorizing Palestine. It's extending. It,
Yeah,
yes,
it's
it
fighting
has.
7 people. It's fighting 7 people right now, and it's crazy. I never knew of a victim that would be attacking 7 countries.
Absolutely. My question is this. It's also about to draw the United States into a conflict with Iran. What do
Mhm.
you think this holds for the world? Analysts have said we are risking a nuclear conflict
Yes.
that could end humanity as we know it. Do you think that this is a more likely scenario than the liberation of Palestine and a closer move, a step towards a free and fairer world?
Honestly, it's so difficult to tell. I would hope that we don't move towards nuclear war, but actually, some people say it's impossible nuclear war in this age. I don't believe that. I actually think it's a possibility. I think it's a real possibility, actually. And I think that we should be very afraid of this movement. And I think, like most battle scenarios, people take risks and gambles in the hope that they win something. So, and people they calculate and they see, right? So right now, I know that the Israel sees its greatest existential threat as Iran. They believe Iran needs to be taken out for Israel. For any secure future for Israel, Iran needs to be taken out. Iran isn't a country that can just be destroyed like America has destroyed previous countries in the past, right? Iran is very well equipped, and they're very close. If they don't already have a nuclear weapon, to be fair, they're very close. So it's like, what calculation will Israel make? I think any rational actors would think about diplomacy and would think about negotiation, right? But Israel, Netanyahu, and Israel in general, and the leaders of Israel have shown us time and time again that diplomacy and rationality is not what they invested in. They want dominance, right? And I don't think in that region they can get dominance. So I don't know how it's going to play out. I still hope that it doesn't get to that point, but who knows? It can very much get to that point.
Um, Another question that I would like to ask is, many countries in the West have actually, almost torn the fabric of their own nationhood apart for Israel.
Yeah.
We've seen the rise of repression and actual fascism,
Yeah.
and we've seen in centuries. What does this mean for the future? Let us believe in the, inevitable possibility of the liberation of Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the face of that, with that understanding, do you think that the edge of the cliff that Western societies have pushed themselves, do you think there's any redemption?
Nah, I don't think any redemption. I think that they can do some damage control. And, people are fickle, right? A lot of people will forget and move on. Like we saw the Iraq war. But I think fundamentally, like if we're talking about the political capital that the West perhaps once had to talk about, to lecture on parts of the world, etc., that's gone completely. Like this will be a moment in which I don't think they can recover from, unless it's like a serious fundamental change and apologies and reckoning with what happened and punishment for those involved and give cover for Israel. If not, then yeah, this is a moment which can never go away because people will fundamentally will continue to lay bare the contradictions and keep talking about the hypocrisy.
Yeah, yeah, very, very accurate. I'm going to ask the conversations that will take place, after this phase, because it's a phase that will pass, inshallah. But the conversations that we are going to have after now, and how countries are going to seek to punish the actors, that enabled and participated in the ongoing crimes. Do you think it would extend some justice to other crimes that have been committed in history? Do you think that some parts of Africa that also experience the same terror and you know other parts of the world, other groups and populations in the world that's long been seeking one form of justice or the other from, the colonial system. Do you think that the liberation of Palestine and efforts to punish these current crimes would also extend some justice to that?
Yeah, I do actually. I said this that when we say Palestine crystallizes so many struggles for us, right? It's a mirror to the whole entire Western world. That's why I think a win for Palestine is a win for like all several other injustices because it opens up space for other countries to make the case against their either former colonial partnership or ongoing colonial relationship with people. We can talk about the issue of occupation. We can talk about imperialism more. We can talk about the relationship that the global north has to the global south. I think Palestine represents so many struggles that a win for Palestine and liberate Palestine opens up space for other countries to have the conversation, open up space for other countries to make the case as well. So I definitely feel that, yeah, that's important.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
So
much
far
for your
for your time,
no worries.
for the conversation. But for you personally, as an individual, what's the next step? I know that the threat of deportation has been eased, but it's
Yeah.
not yet the end. Where do you go from here? And how do you plan on tackling the challenges that are on your way?
Yeah, thank you as well. I guess final thoughts for me. Where am I going forward? I'm going to continue to get my degree. I'm going to continue to talk about Palestine. I'm going to continue to raise the issue. I'm going to continue to be involved in movement on the ground in any capacity that I'm able to. And yeah, this doesn't stop. I think, yes, I'm still banned from campus, but fundamentally, Palestinian organizing goes beyond Cornell's campus, and there's many other ways to be involved. And this has not deterred me in the slightest. It's only just strengthened my resolve, from being honest. It's only just made me more confident in my position that this is the right thing to do. And those who are often on the right side of history have to bear some of the consequence of the position that they take. But I have absolutely no regrets, and I would do everything again the same way. If anything, I feel like I still don't feel like we've done enough. I haven't done enough. I feel ashamed, actually, in many ways. I feel ashamed that the genocide is still going on. I feel ashamed that we haven't done enough to make this stop a whole year later. I feel, fundamentally in a position of weakness, but I'm not deterred, and I have no regrets, and I continue to carry on. And the only thing I can say in this moment is the profile that I've gained is not going to be self-serving. I have no issue. I have no stake in this being about myself. Absolutely. Again, it's like people often say this thing of like, no, of course, I wish the world was a better place. Like I wish the world was a world of peace and people lived together in harmony. And I wish there was a place of mutual respect. And I wish that people didn't have to go to bed hungry. Like I wish there was a better world and I wouldn't have to do any of these things, right? It's not like I woke up one day thinking to myself, okay, I have to sacrifice or I have to fight. No, it's the conditions of the world, my assessment of the conditions of the world, and the fact that I still believe I have a heart and I still have my humanity intact that has forced me to take the decisions that have compelled me and put me myself in these positions and taking the position and stances that I've taken, right? It's because of the condition of the world. But given that is a condition of the world and given that I do have my humanity intact, I'm not going to be deterred by what they do to me. And I have absolutely no regrets.
Mm. Profound. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
No, pleasure, man.
I'm just going to quickly chip in a question that we didn't dwell much on. We didn't dwell much on that
Okay.
theme, but I want you to address it. Now, you were severely, targeted on campus for exercising your right to free speech. This is a phenomenon that, we could say rare in the West, but very common across Africa. And I'm speaking particularly in the context of Nigeria, where dozens, if not in the hundreds, of students who have been sent out of school for exercising rights like this. Myself, I was expelled from the Nigerian Institute of Journalism years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yes, for related quote offenses. What do you have something to say for African students and people across the world, young people who are being targeted for exercising this rights?
Yeah, I think fundamentally I'll just obviously don't be deterred by it. Don't be deterred by it. But I also think as well, it should bring to bear that people often want to tout the West as being the safe haven and bastion of free speech. But I think the levels of repression we're facing right now has really undone any notions of liberalism and these places of being liberal democracies. And again, those of us in Africa often speak about the freedoms that people have in the West, but it's not true. It's fundamentally not true. You have freedom up until a point, and you are going to be repressed in very similar ways that you experience in Africa, actually. So I would say, like, but again, fundamentally, it's about the choices that you make. And fundamentally, if you believe in things strongly enough, they will often come, these causes often come with consequences.
Great. Thank you once again for
No
obliging
worries
this
at all.
conversation.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, we've come to the end. If there is anything else you'd like to say or questions you'd like to
No,
ask
that's
me.
all good. No, thank you so much, man. Please be in touch. Keep in touch with me. And if you have any more questions, just message me as well.